Newcastle Brown Ale is a brown ale, originally produced in Newcastle upon Tyne, but now brewed by Heineken at the John Smith's Brewery in Tadcaster, North Yorkshire. Launched in 1927 by Colonel Jim Porter after 3 years of development, the merger of Newcastle Breweries with Scottish Brewers afforded the beer national distribution, and sales peaked in the United Kingdom during the early 1970s. The brand underwent a resurgence in the late 1980s and early 1990s, with student unions selling the brand. By the late 1990s, the beer was the most widely distributed alcoholic product in the UK. By the 2000s, the majority of sales were in the United States, although it still sells 100 million bottles annually in the UK. In 2005, brewing moved from Newcastle to Dunston, Tyne and Wear, and in 2010 to Tadcaster. Newcastle Brown Ale is perceived in the UK as a working man's beer, with a long association with heavy industry, the traditional economic staple of the northeast of England. In export markets, it is seen as a trendy, premium import and is predominantly drunk by the young. It was one of the first beers to be distributed in a clear glass bottle, and it is most readily associated with this form of dispense in the UK, being very rarely seen on draft. History Tyne Brewery, Newcastle Newcastle Brown Ale was originally created by Lieutenant Colonel James Herbert Porter, a third-generation brewer at Newcastle Breweries, in 1927. Porter had served in the North Staffordshire Regiment in the First World War, earning his DSO with bar before moving to Newcastle. Porter had refined the recipe for Newcastle Brown Ale alongside chemist Archie Jones over a period of 3 years. When Porter actually completed the beer, he believed it to be a failure, as he had actually been attempting to recreate Bass Ale. The original beer had an original gravity of 1060A and was 6.25 ABV, and it sold at a premium price of 9 shillings for a dozen pint bottles. Newcastle Brown Ale went into production at Tyne Brewery in 1927, with Newcastle Breweries having occupied the site since 1890, with brewing on the site dating back to 1868. The Blue Star logo was introduced to the Newcastle Brown Ale bottle in 1928, the year after the beer was launched. The 5 points of the star represent the 5 founding breweries of Newcastle. Bow of Sunderland, a rival brewer, quickly developed Double Maxim to compete. After the merger of Scottish Brewers with Newcastle Breweries in 1960, Newcastle Brown Ale became a flagship brand of Scottish and Newcastle alongside Maceuan's Export and Younger's Tartan Special. By 1997, Scottish and Newcastle claimed that it was the most widely distributed alcoholic product in both pubs and off-licenses in the country. Moved to Federation Brewery, Gateshead. Despite investing £16.6 million in a new bottling plant at the Tyne Brewery in 1999, Scottish and Newcastle announced its closure on April 22, 2004, in order to consolidate the brewing of beer and ale in the Federation Brewery site in Dunston, Gateshead, which was to pass to them with their £7.2 million purchase of the Federation Brewery. The purchasing consolidation at Dunston created the new brewing company, Newcastle Federation Breweries. The last production run of brown ale in Newcastle came off the Tyne Brewery line in May 2005. Pre-production trial brews were conducted at Dunston to ensure no change occurred in its taste after the move. The Tyne Brewery site was bought by a consortium of Newcastle University, Newcastle City Council, and the Regional Development Agency 1 North East, as part of the wider Newcastle Science City project. Demolition of the former brewery began on March 8, 2007. The triggering of the controlled demolition of the former Barrack Road bottling plant opposite St James Park was ceremonially performed by Sir Bobby Robson on June 23, 2008. Moved to John Smith's Brewery, Tadcaster. Bottling of Newcastle Brown Ale moved to the John Smith's Brewery in Tadcaster, North Yorkshire, in 2007. Heineken bought Scottish and Newcastle in a joint deal with Carlsberg in 2008. On October 13, 2009, Scottish and Newcastle announced that it planned to close the Dunston Brewery in 2010, moving production of brown ale to the John Smith's Brewery in Tadcaster. The company cited the general fall in the market for beer, overcapacity in its plants in general, and the fact that the Dunston site was currently operating at just 60% capacity despite the fact that sales of Newcastle Brown Ale had never been higher as reasons for the closure. The plan to close the brewery by the end of May 2010 was confirmed on April 21, 2010. In 2015, it was announced that caramel coloring, which has been used since the beer was launched, would be removed from the beer for health reasons. Instead, roasted malt would be used to darken the beer. Production and distribution: Newcastle Brown Ale is brewed with pale malt and crystal malt. It has a lower hopping rate than traditional English bitters. The beer is one of the United Kingdom's leading bottled ales and is in the top 20 highest-selling ales overall, selling around 100,000 HL annually. At the time of Brewing moving to Dunston in 2005, Newcastle Brown was being exported to 41 countries. At times, over half of the brewery's output is directed overseas to the US. In 2010, more than 640,000 HL the beer was sold in the United States, more than double the 2001 total. In the United States the beer is available in bottles and in keg. Newcastle Brown is also distributed in cans in the US, but is very rare. In Canada and France, the beer is available in short and tall bottles and in cans. The beer is also available in British-themed pubs as a draft beer in Australia and New Zealand, brewed in the UK and imported by the Beer and Cider Company. The UK brewed bottled, kegs, and cans are widely available in Australian liquor outlets as part of their international range. It is also popular in Canada, available on draft at many British-themed pubs. Names and phrases: in 2000, the beer was renamed Newcastle Brown with the ale being removed from the front label. This change, only in the UK, was due to market research claiming that the term ale was outdated and costing the company sales in the youth drinking markets. The older name was reinstated with no fanfare in 2004, when it was realized that the change had made no difference to sales. In the Northeast, Newcastle Brown Ale is often given the nickname dog, alluding to the British euphemism of seeing a man about a dog. It is also known as Brown, as pronounced in the Geordie dialect. Elsewhere in the UK it is known as Nuki Brown, a nickname poorly received in the Northeast as Nuki sounds like Nuki. Serving: Newcastle Brown Ale is traditionally sold in Britain in 1 imperial pint and, more recently, 550 milliliter bottles. Typically, the ale is consumed from a 12 imperial fluid-ounce Wellington glass. This allows the drinker to regularly top up the beer and thereby maintain a frothy head. In the United States, it is sold in 12 US fluid-ounce servings. In April 2010, Heineken USA introduced the Wellington glass, branded as the Geordie Schooner, for Newcastle Brown Ale consumers in America. The glass features a nucleated base. Association with the Northeast: like many British breweries, Newcastle Brown is strongly associated with its local area, in this case Northeast England. While the name provides a lot of this, the sponsorship of Newcastle United, the depiction of the River Tyne in the Blue Star has helped ensure its association. Its local provenance gave the brand an association with hardy, working-class traditions and values. Under the European Union Protected Geographical Status laws introduced in 1992, the name Newcastle Brown Ale was granted protected brand status in February 2000. In late 2007 this was removed when brewing of the beer moved wholly away from its place of origin to Tadcaster in Yorkshire. The company was obliged to make a formal application to cancel it. The closure of S&N's Dunston Brewery in May 2010 left Cameron's Brewery in Hartlepool as the only remaining significant volume brewery based in the northeast of England. Variations = Special editions = When the Australian brewer Elders IXL launched a takeover bid for Scottish and Newcastle, locals of Newcastle began the Keep Us on Top campaign. As a sign of solidarity, the Newcastle Brown label was inverted until the takeover was quashed. In 2005, the last 3,000 bottles produced in Newcastle were given commemorative labels 121 years of brewing history, last bottles produced at Tyne Brewery April 2005. And given to the brewery staff. In 2006, A special production run of 2.5 million bottles celebrated the career of Newcastle United striker Alan Shearer, who had recently broken the club's scoring record and was about to retire from football. The brewery produced the special editions featuring Newcastle United's black and white stripes and Shearer's portrait, in exchange for a donation to Shearer's testimonial match, and they went on sale from April 17 that year. In 2007, a special edition was released to celebrate local rock band Maximo Park. The label was designed by the band and the beer released to coincide with the band's concert at Newcastle Metro Radio Arena on December 15. Also in 2007, a special 80th anniversary themed bottle was distributed. Other Newcastle brands. Newcastle Exhibition is a draft pasteurized keg beer first introduced in 1929 and commonly found around the Newcastle area. Newcastle Amber Ale was a light ale available until the 1980s. It was a diluted version of Exhibition. Amber Ale and a much stronger aged stock beer were formerly blended to create Newcastle Brown Ale. This method was discontinued sometime before the brand was moved to Dunston. Newcastle Star was a strong bottled beer available from 1999 to 2006. In 2010, Heineken USA launched Newcastle Summer Ale in bottles. In 2011, Heineken USA launched Newcastle Werewolf and Winter IPA. In 2012, Heineken USA will introduce Newcastle Founders Ale as their spring seasonal. In 2012, Summer Ale and Founders Ale were launched in Tesco's across the UK. In winter 2012, Newcastle Winter Ale and Newcastle Nocturnal Ale were also launched in Tesco stores across the UK. In popular culture, Newcastle Brown Ale is mentioned in Eric Hutchinson's song Rock 'n' Roll. Lately it's been a big hassle. Heineken and Newcastle. In the film Celeste and Jessie Forever, Jessie is seen drinking a bottle of Newcastle Brown Ale in a bar. The ale is mentioned in the popular blues rock song 30 Days in the Hole, by British group Humble Pie, in a widely circulated recording of stage banter by heavy metal band Venom. Singer Kronos identifies it as the bottle he is drinking on stage, saying this comes from where Venom come from, and it knocks you on your F-king back. It has been seen drunk in the sitcom The Big Bang Theory. It was also seen in the Showtime drama comedy House of Lies. It also makes a brief appearance in the film Taken in the scene where Brian's friends turn up at his front door during the barbecue scene. It is also shown in the film The Devil's Own during the night when the Irish guest arrives in the home of Sergeant Tom O'Meara. At the dinner table, the sergeant says, "I suppose you have this over there." References: Good Company, The Story of Scottish and Newcastle, Berry Ritchie and Susanna May, James and James Limited, ISBN 0-907383-08-4. External links. Official website.